Can't post comments. What is this? Hey, if you're on here, if you're joining from YouTube, if you could do me a favor and if you have the ability to leave a comment or in the chat or something like that in YouTube. Oh, thank you, James. I wanted to see what this looked like. Let's see how does this work? What do I have to do to get your name on here? I'm just testing StreamYard right now to see. Maybe if enough people show up, I'll talk some Lakers, but I just wanted to see what this really looks like to you guys. So I appreciate you helping me out in testing this. Let's see here. What's up, P? What's up, James? Do I sound good? Does the audio sound good? Do I need to move the mic closer? Probably. I wonder. Let's see if I move the mic a little bit closer. I don't know what's going on with my camera and why it has the entire left side of my face as if I'm standing next to the headlights of a car right now. What's up, Ishmael? What's up, Jay? A lot of you guys. Okay. Well, we got 4 people in here. That's kind of nice. Middle of the day. Okay. Let's see what happens if I close this window. And then my whole face gets lit up. Let's see, how do I get your comments? Oh, that's how I get your comments to show up on here. That's kind of cool. All right. Yeah. Okay. Let's see how this works now. Yeah, so I signed up for this. I signed up for the StreamYard service because I was trying to figure out the best way to just kind of do live streams because I do it with OBS and it can be a little difficult to do that. And so this is much, much easier. And the thing with OBS is it's harder to stream out and stuff like that. So I'm just going to spend some time talking about this whole Lakers, Jazz, Knicks thing. So you guys are welcome to hang out if you want. I'm just testing the ability of how good this sort of works. And you guys can always leave comments and stuff like that in the chat. And if you guys have questions or just want to discuss something, we can do that too as well. So so Mike Scotto from Hoops Hype, kind of put out a report saying that the Knicks and the Lakers and the Jazz have had some discussions. What's up, Jeffrey? I see your question. The Knicks, Lakers, and Jazz have had some discussions in regards to Russ's contract and moving Russ and stuff like that. And that should come as no surprise because if you guys have been reading anything or watching any of the YouTube videos, you guys know that I sort of mentioned that was something that was probably going to happen. It's probably going to be a rumor that was going to happen eventually. And I'm not surprised that that's a rumor that's now being presented and stuff like that. Really, that it's not. I think this is an alternative that's actually a real alternative, not just from a just like a Russ destination thing, but this is an actual real alternative that's probably being considered for the Lakers in case the Kyrie option isn't there. There's like a lot of people who are quite. There are people who are, like the roller coaster of emotions are just going up and down when it comes to just the Kyrie stuff, right? So yesterday, Kyrie, or however long ago, Kyrie goes out and he goes and he plays in a pro-am in Jersey, and then Nets fans show up, or not Nets fans, sorry, Nets players show up, and then the Nets account is posting him and stuff like that. So it's been sort of an up and down sort of experience if you're all in on getting Kyrie and stuff like that. But I mean, that's just kind of, it's August, so that's just kind of going to be the situation that people are in. And so I understand like that every time news comes out and it's not saying that Kyrie or KD want to leave and stuff like that from the Nets, the Lakers Twitter and Lakers fans get very upset. But look, the Lakers keeping themselves available in case Kyrie does get moved, regardless of what we think we know or what's being reported to us, is, that sort of matters because we've done this exercise before. I mean, we did this exercise for Kawhi. We did this exercise with Paul George. We did this exercise with Anthony Davis. And then we did this exercise with name whatever player mentions the Lakers as a potential team to, capture a potential team to with the Lakers as a landing spot. Like we did it with LeBron. Like, so this is a thing that's going to always happen. And I think one of the tough parts is that if you spend a lot of time on Twitter, or it's not even a Twitter thing, but it's just Twitter has this way of because of so much information, new information that's always coming out, and some of it's not necessarily news. It's, Katie's brother liked a post that had Katie in a Suns jersey, or, stuff like that. Like whenever stuff like that happens, or, like Russ was working out with Oladipo, like whenever stuff like that comes out, I think it pushes, it makes our short-term memory even worse. But in reality, this has always been the way that it always works out for the Lakers. Like we're always going to be a team that's just sitting around and waiting. And that's what we have to do because it's a balance, right? Like if, let's say the Lakers, just think about it from both perspectives. And this is not shooting any bail for anybody, but think about it from the front office perspective and how the fans feel about the front office. If the Lakers turn around and they make the trade, right? They make the trade for Pat Beverly, the Jazz trade, or let's say they make the Indiana trade, or they make whatever trade they do. The very, very next thing that's going to come out, whether it's true or not, is that the Lakers could have gotten Kyrie Irving for something less than whatever they gave for Buddy Hield and Miles Turner, or whatever the Jazz package was, right? Because that's how it works. For folks that are in the media and writers and stuff like that, their goal is, obviously engagement and stuff like that. But at the same time, there's a perception of who won the trade, right? Like nobody wants to be the loser in a trade. No GM wants to look like he was the loser in a trade and stuff. Like nobody wants to be Billy King with what happened, with that Celtics trade and stuff like that when they traded for KG and Paul Pierce. That's a big part sometimes of how some of these things sort of work out. So in the Lakers situation, if Kyrie is available and if he has been discussed, and if Sean Marks has turned around and told Rob Pelinka, we don't know when we'll move him, but if you guys are available, this is sort of what it'll take for us to move him. And Rob Pelinka or the Lakers are okay with that cost, they're going to wait around. And that's just the way it works. And so I think for the fans like us, it going through this entire process is always going to be something that's like a nightmare. Like we're always going to be sitting here and thinking, oh, this, Kyrie went here, or somebody liked Kyrie's post, or Kyrie was high-fiving some Nets teammate. But that's just the nature of how it is. So, and I think that's what the Lakers are going to do. The only way the Lakers move on and make a trade before we see anything else is, basically what McMenamin and all these other guys have said. They're waiting for full confirmation that Kyrie's just not getting moved. And that's not going to happen via tweet. It's not going to happen Kyrie's not going to post something online and say, I'm staying with the Nets, right? Either he's going to get an extension, Josiah will change his mind and Sean Marks will change it. He'll get an extension, and then we'll know that. Or we'll know that Kyrie's staying. Or, Sean Marks will call Rob Pelinka on the phone or text him, or however the way these guys, talk to each other, email, and say, yeah, we're not going to be able to move Kyrie, and then the Lakers will move on from it. And I think that's just the way it's going to work. It's not going to happen through social media. Like, we'll find out if somebody gets traded when the social media thing sort of happens and stuff like that. So that's just the nature of how this works. And as annoying and as painful as it is, it's just the way it's going to work. And we just have to sit around and be patient, because the worst thing that can happen to the front office, whether it's true or not, because of how accepting fans are of what somebody writes or what somebody says on television, whether it's true or not, if the Lakers make a trade before they know Kyrie is not available, and word comes out after that trade that Kyrie was available for something potentially less than what the Lakers traded for, the Lakers look dumb. Fans will kill Rob. Fans will kill Jeannie. Fans will kill everybody in the organization. That's what's going to happen. So we have to know without a shadow of a doubt, they're not trading Kyrie before we make auxiliary moves. And that's the right thing to do, because that's the gamble that you play. And that's probably why you're not hearing very much, outside of very specific writers. That's why you're probably not hearing very much about Russ. That's probably why you're hearing, Darvin Ham say that, this is what we need. This is the roster that we have. He's operating up based on what the actual team has and who's actually on the roster and what the expectations are. So he's going to have, he's going to talk up Russ, and he's going to say that AD is the most important, he's the key to all this and stuff like that. So that's sort of my thoughts. That's sort of my thought in regard to like this entire waiting thing. Like, it's annoying, and we live in an age and time where, we get instant gratification. You order something on Amazon, it comes in the next 2 days. Like, you sign up for a program, you get access immediately, stuff like that. I signed up for StreamYard earlier today. There was no setup time. I just launched a stream, changed out some assets, and that's just how it works. So but that's not how trades work. And so the Lakers have to wait it out. So before I jump into the questions, one of the things that I wanted to sort of go over was this report. And so, in the previous Radio KVE episode, I sort of mentioned that it didn't make sense. The Lakers don't want Julius Randle, because even if LeBron signs for a 1+1, and lines up his contract with Anthony Davis, with the whole thing with him wanting to play with his son, like, it doesn't make sense for the Lakers to take on a guy who has a contract 4 years out, and just, without any plan. There's nothing that this front office has showed that they have the foresight to look 4 years down the road, right? Like, letting people walk for nothing and not retaining them just to be able to use their salaries in a trade later. Like, that's not a strength of what this front office does. They will just let somebody walk. So in terms of the way I think about it, I definitely do not think that this front office has the foresight to grab a guy who may be on a 4-year contract and then like know how to move him two years from now if LeBron retires and Anthony Davis, decides to go to another team. So I don't think they'll do that. I don't think they know how to operate in that manner. I think that is a quality that very, very good front offices, they project out and they go in that manner. I don't even know who's involved with making those decisions. Like, is it just Rob? Is it Rob and other folks? I don't know how that works out. And so I don't think they'll target something like that. Even the talk about getting Kyrie, right? Like, we trade for Kyrie. Let's say LeBron takes his 1+1. Let's say over the weekend, LeBron decides to take his 1+1. So now his contract lines up exactly with Anthony Davis's. So my thing is this: Kyrie turned down the extension, reportedly, the extension with the Nets because of, games played clauses or just something that wasn't guaranteed in the nature from what I read. And so if Kyrie gets traded to the Lakers and Kyrie turns around and says, well, I want a 4-year contract, I want the full extension, I don't know how the Lakers are going to approach that, because I don't know if they're going to extend any player that's not LeBron James or Anthony Davis beyond those, the following 2-3 years. So that's something that's like, I think is an important thing that we should probably kind of think about, even the steps after trading. If you trade for Kyrie, like, do they want to keep him on the books longer than what Anthony Davis may potentially be on the books? Um, if we trade for Kyrie and will Kyrie be okay with taking a contract that has a player option that ends at the same time as Anthony Davis? Like, those sort of small things sort of matter and stuff like that. And I'll be very curious to see if something like that sort of works out. But it's something that you have to consider, right? Like, because it's a negotiating position that the Lakers, obviously we're hoping that, they're unofficially there's been some discussion about it, but obviously that would be illegal. So we probably never hear about something like that, or else the Lakers would lose draft picks or something like that if something like that was happening. So whether that happens or not will be interesting to see. But jumping back into this article, this should come as no surprise. Like, all season long, I've been trying to tell Laker fans that Russ's contract has a lot of value, because historically, expiring contracts have always had value. The only reason why Russ's contract doesn't have the same maybe level of value is because of the size of the contract, because it's $47 million, and because it's Russ. Because it's just been Russ slander all over the timeline every single day. A lot of people have built followings off of it, so it's going to continue to happen. But this should come as no surprise, and the reason why you're hearing the Jazz be set up as a team, linked as a team, is because of what's happened, what the Jazz have done. And so in the write-up that I did, there's actually been 3 specific things that have happened with the Jazz that kind of lead me to believe that they're going to go into a full teardown. Obviously, first and foremost was the Gobert trade. It's not that they traded him. It's the fact that they traded him to a division rival. Like, it would be different if you traded him to like the Hawks, right? Or some other team on the East Coast that is out of their division or out of the conference. That would have made more sense, that maybe they thought that they could continue to be competitive. But it's a little strange when you do that and you trade to somebody within your division rival. And then on top of that, they didn't take back anybody of like they didn't even take back D'Angelo Russell. Like, they didn't take back anybody of like significant value where they could build up his value and then trade him later, like midway through the season or something like that. They literally took it for the most picks available. And so a lot of people were like, well, why would you give up this many picks for Rudy Gobert? Why would you make them all unprotected? That just may have been the way Danny Ainge negotiated it out. He may have asked for D'Angelo Russell, and maybe the Wolves really didn't want to trade him. And so Danny Ainge says, all right, then give me an unprotected first. And that's neither here nor there. That's just how negotiating works. And so that's why it worked out that way. So that was red flag number 1. And red flag number 2 was hiring Will Hardy. He's a very young coach, and they gave him a 5-year deal. And there's no reason to believe that, not that he's a bad coach, but there's no reason to believe that as soon as he jumps in without Rudy Gobert, with only Donovan Mitchell as your core star player. And we know that their defense was very dependent on Rudy Gobert, protecting the rim, that all of a sudden magically this team will continue to keep pace. Remember, the Jazz were a very, very good regular season team for the past couple of years. So that was sort of red flag number 2, bringing in a very young coach, regardless of what his acumen may be. He may be a wonderful coach, but it's just something doesn't seem right with that. So you trade Rudy, you hire Will Hardy. And then the last thing was, and it was a small thing that I'm surprised more people didn't say anything about it. It was letting Eric Paschall leave to the Wolves of all teams for a 2-way contract. And if nobody knows, or if you're not aware, Eric Paschall is Donovan Mitchell's buddy. They're best friends. The Jazz traded, I think, a 2nd-round pick to the Warriors or something like that, where they traded something to get Eric Paschall on the team. The whole idea, I thought, for trading for him was that they were trying to, get younger, more athletic, add more wings and stuff like that. And then for them, just a few months later, for Paschall to leave on a 2-way contract of all things. They didn't even sign him to a minimum contract to let him leave to the Wolves. Again, a team in your division. That's strike 3. That's way too many things that just don't align with kind of how you would try to maximize your star player. And so that's why I think Mitchell's going to move. And so I think that's why you're hearing about the Lakers being linked in this conversation to the Jazz. And obviously the destination that everybody's discussed, and it's what Scotto sort of talks about in this example, is the Knicks really want him bad. And though the Knicks really want him bad, like the Knicks they have the salary, outgoing salary to send out in order to make the deal possible. But the problem is that the Jazz don't want, the Jazz may not necessarily want any of those salaries. So the guy that you've been hearing get rumored from the Knicks attached to the Lakers, you heard it last week. It was Julius Randle. And so we're probably thinking to ourselves, like, why would the Knicks want Russ, and why would they want Julius Randle? Why would they be giving up? Well, we know why they're giving up Julius Randle, but we don't know why they would want Russ in return. Like, they just got Jalen Brunson, they have Derrick Rose on the roster. Doesn't make any sense. So I think that my speculation has just been, and again, I mentioned this in the last episode, my speculation has pretty much been that they are asking about moving Russ, and they're trying to get Randle to come to the Lakers because the Jazz don't want Julius Randle's contract. Remember, both these teams, both the Knicks and the Jazz for sure, they're not going to pay luxury tax for a team that they don't think is competitive. And the Knicks are just low enough in luxury tax where, like the Knicks are low enough in luxury tax where they can move Randle. They don't have to necessarily move Randle. They can add Donovan, and they should be okay. But that's probably the reason why you're hearing Randle's name get mentioned. The Knicks probably tried to offer Julius Randle to the Jazz. The Jazz said, no, we're not taking any long-term salary. And then if you guys follow Ian Begley, who's a wonderful writer for the Knicks, he covers the Knicks for SNY, I think is the abbreviation that he covers it for. He mentioned that the Jazz asked about RJ Barrett. And, the Knicks don't want to pass. They don't want to trade RJ Barrett. And so, they like him a lot. And if you watch Knicks games, like there's a little bit of an redundancy overlap with RJ Barrett and Julius Randle. So it makes sense that they would try to move off of Randle and keep RJ and then find a way to add Donovan to the team. So if we take that entire ecosystem, the rumor with the Knicks, the rumor with the Jazz, and everything that's going on with it, the reason why they're calling the Lakers is because the Lakers have the one large expiring salary, and they can take on like a contract that has 2 years left or a 1+1 left and stuff like that. So Scotto is basically alluding to that, and that's what I wanted to share on this screen. But that's essentially what they're alluding to. The Knicks are calling the Lakers, if this is all accurate. And Scotto's a very nice writer, so I don't think he would just say anything. Like the reason why they're reaching out to Lakers and why you're hearing Russ mention is for that very reason, and that's the value of the expiring contract. There's no strings attached if you take it. And remember, even though he's $47 million, the Lakers can, because they're a luxury tax team, they can take more money back. So if they trade Russ, and I'll get to that in a second because I'll pull up my write-up. If they send Russ out, they can take up to $59 million. It doesn't necessarily have to be all from the Jazz. It can be from the Knicks too as well. They can both send a combined up to $59 million to so you're offering cap relief to even the Knicks, depending on how much we take back, long-term money we take back from the Jazz, you're offering them cap relief. And that kind of stuff matters. As much as Twitter likes to believe that everything like salaries don't matter, long-term salaries don't matter, all that sort of stuff, that stuff matters. Like the reason the Knicks are okay with possibly trading Randle for Russell Westbrook straight up is because with a buyout, let's say Russ, there's somebody out there that wants to pay Russ the same thing John Wall got paid, like $6 million for a taxpayer MLE. That's $41 million that they're taking on and sending out. What's Randle's number? Like $112 million or $114 million in guaranteed money. So you're saving $50 million just on a single move, if not closer to $60 million. That stuff matters. And for teams that don't like paying the luxury tax, for teams that want to, open up minutes or open up touches for the next guy, like RJ Barrett and stuff like that. That's why they're trying to float something like that. And so that kind of stuff all matters. And it's never just, this guy's a better basketball player and this guy's a worse basketball player. So you have to send us more. It's not like that. And that's why a lot of times you see teams throw a player in that's just a throw in, and then that player ends up flourishing and ends up getting a bigger contract elsewhere. That's just the nature of how it works, and it's nothing. It's nothing that's new. It's always happened, and the Lakers aren't an exception to it. And so that's why you're hearing rumors like that. So I'm not surprised if anybody's been following the videos so far. None of this should be a surprise for you guys. You guys should know that this was eventually coming. And so the next thing I wanted to do was just to kind of cover just what this was. And so based on just some of the information that I had learned over just the past couple of weeks, one of the things that I had seen is that, or one of the things that I had learned was that the Jazz were not asking, and don't quote me on this, I don't know if it's true, this is just me speculating, that the Jazz aren't asking for 2 picks for taking on Russ's contract. Because for them, they're facilitating the Lakers are facilitating a trade that would allow the Knicks to send whatever 5 picks or whatever it is. And the reason why the Knicks are reaching out to the Lakers is because they have the large expiry. And the Lakers are a team that's willing to take on longer salary. So for the people that turn around and ask the question of like, oh, why don't they do this with somebody else? But not every team around the league is willing to take on more salary. Not every team around the league is willing to take on a 1+1, a 2-year player, or a 3-year player. And obviously, this is very much based on Bron's extension. If Bron takes a 1+1, you can effectively add players that have 2 or 3 years left on their deal for the Lakers, or trade for players, that have 2 or 3 years left on their deal, because that's what the window is probably going to be, the remaining window for Bron, unless he's continues to be a crazy athlete and doesn't, keeps a higher level of production, or if he decides not to leave, the Lakers grab Bronny or something like that. So I had mocked up a trade based on just kind of what I had seen. I don't know if this is what it's going to be, but I tried to crunch out the math and stuff like that. So what you see at the top here is the stuff that's outgoing. And I tried to keep the salary numbers in here so it's a little bit easier for us to visualize. But you can see what the Lakers outgoing would be, what the Knicks outgoing salaries would be, what the Jazz outgoing salary would be, and then just what the incoming players would be. And so the idea behind this is that the Lakers send Westbrook to the Jazz. They send a first-round pick. So that's one that the Jazz got. The Knicks, because the Lakers don't want Randall, the Knicks still have to send us about $24 million. They have to send, not us, but they have to send out $24 million to land Donovan Mitchell, because that's just kind of how trade rules work. And so if they're not going to send Julius Randle because the Jazz don't want him and the Lakers don't want him, what is the next best alternative? So, they have guys like Derrick Rose, they have all those other guys and stuff like that. But the one that seemed to make the most sense, based on just kind of, also Scott's article mentions Cam Reddish. Like, if they send out Fournier and Reddish to the Lakers, and Emmanuel quickly goes, because they need one more small salary, it quickly goes to the Jazz. They can attach quickly in 5 first-rounders. Again, I don't know if that's what they're going to do. I don't know what the protections are going to be. But quickly in 5 first-rounders, let's just say that's okay, and that's okay with what the Knicks are giving up. They're not giving up anybody of like real significance out of their rotation. Quickly is a nice prospect for them, but if you're adding Donovan Mitchell, I don't know how many opportunities Quickly is getting. And then you already have Jalen Brunson on top of that, and you got RJ, and then Randall will still be on the roster, and then Rose will still be on the roster. I don't know necessarily how they fit in. And if you're trading for Donovan Mitchell, they're going to be trying to compete for deeper rounds of the playoffs. They're not trying to be a team that's and from 6, 7, 8 or a play-in team and stuff like that. So in my mind, the way I see it is Fournier and Reddish are probably the closest heavy salary filler to send to the Lakers that the Lakers would be okay with accepting, because we don't have a starting 2 guard. And that's what would end up happening. And for the Jazz, they would send out Mitchell. They get six first-round picks, which is what they've been asking for. They've been asking for 5 to 6 first-round picks in return for Mitchell. They send out Bogdanovich. They send out Beverly. Now, in your mind, as a Laker fan, you're probably wondering, well, why would the Jazz do that? Why would they send us Bogdanovich and Beverly? Why would they send us like their worst salaries? Well, the Jazz do need the Lakers to send the expiring salary for the deal to be possible. So it's not necessarily and remember, we're sending them a first too. On top of that, we're trying to incentivize. People are trying to incentivize the Lakers to do it, and the Lakers are trying to incentivize everybody else to do it. So we're trying to make this possible for everybody. And if the Jazz's goal is to not take on any long-term salary or to cut long-term salary and take on as many picks as possible, this does it for them. They'll end up getting 6 picks for Donovan Mitchell, first rounders, and then how many did they get from the Wolves for Gobert? Like 4 or 5 first rounders for Gobert. So you're talking about getting 11 picks in return for 2 guys that you decide to move off. That's a pretty good haul in their minds. And if again, they're saving money if they bought him out. If Russ gets bought out, they save even more money in that process. And so if they bought him out and they land Wembanyama, or if they land one of the Thompson twins or Scoot, they may be rebuilding really fast, and those picks end up becoming very valuable. So these sort of teardowns are not uncommon, and they can very much jumpstart this process if they decide to go this avenue. And also if the Lakers decide to go this avenue too as well. But again, I don't know if these details are just me speculating based on just kind of everything that I've read. So that's why I have it set up this way. So thank you for everybody joining, because now I can actually test this out. So one of the questions that we had was from Jeffrey. So how do you compare the Jazz versus Indiana package? Okay, so this is a good one. I don't know how serious Indiana is about trading Miles Turner and trading Buddy Hield. They traded Malcolm Brogdon for what's probably going to be a late first rounder, and they didn't get anything back of significance player-wise. Like Daniel Tice is not anything of significant. Aaron Nesmith, maybe, but he's no players of real significance came back to them. So they more or less traded Malcolm Brogdon, a guy that everybody was saying, is incredibly good and stuff like that, for a late first. And so now, all the posturing you're sort of hearing on Twitter, again, it's the writers that are saying this. So I don't know how much of it's coming from the writer because they cover the Indiana, or if that's actually what's happening behind the scenes and the conversations that are happening between the two GMs. The idea that you have to send 2 first rounders for Miles Turner and Buddy Hield, and then the logic of you need one for the players and another one to get off of Russ's contract. That's not how it works. If that's not how it works between the Jazz and the Knicks, why would that be the way that we do a deal with Pacers? What? And so that's why I mean, if I had to choose between the two, I would actually pick the Jazz option, because we've already signed Thomas Bryant. We've already signed Damian Jones. So if we add Miles Turner, I don't know how those other 2 guys are going to fit into the roster. And if AD is going to be closing games at the 5 anyways, I don't know how Miles Turner fits into the roster there either. So are the Lakers going to be willing to spend $18 million on a player who may be sitting on the bench at the end of games? If you hate Russ, you just went through that exercise, right? You would you're talking about a $47 million player and him needing to be on the bench for somebody else. Would you do that for an $18 million player, especially when the alternative is Anthony Davis? I think that's probably how the Lakers are looking at it. But if you do the trade with the Jazz, and let's say it's something similar to what the Lakers, similar to what I have up here, you put Beverly's in your starting lineup, Fournier's in your starting lineup, you're starting either Thomas Bryant or Damian Jones in your starting lineup. And so a starting lineup of Beverly, Fournier, LeBron, AD, and, one of Thomas Bryant, Damian Jones, pretty good starting lineup, I think, balanced wise, shooting and just kind of offensive defense balance. And then if you are moving, and now I don't know if this is we know Reddish is going to come off the bench because that's what he's doing with the Knicks. He's getting no minutes there. But if Reddish is on the bench, I would hope that Bojan is okay with coming off the bench. He may not be, who knows? But then again, he may not be the guy in the trade. But if your wings coming off the bench are Bojan, Reddish, and who am I thinking of? Troy Brown Jr. Skill wise, that's a different thing. Productivity wise, that's a different thing. But size wise, that's pretty good. Like and you've got guys that have size and have skill, and that's really the thing that this Lakers team is lacking right now. They've got athletes and they've got bodies, but they don't have the scoring and skill that they need to really push them into the top. And so I like the Jazz trade. And remember, Evan Fournier is like 6'7", 6'6", 6'7", or something like that. So he's technically a wing too at the same time. He's their starting two guard for the Knicks, if I'm not mistaken. And they use him, similar in the way that the Bucks use Chris Middleton. Maybe not on ball as much, but he runs pick and roll as an auxiliary ball handler and stuff like that. So the other thing that this allows us to do also is, and Brandon, you mentioned it here, like we still have Lonnie Walker on this team. We still have Kendrick Nunn on this team. We still have Talon on this team. I would suspect that two of those three guys are probably still going to get moved just because it's a minutes thing. It's an opportunity thing. Lonnie's working towards his next contract. Nunn is working towards his next contract. Talon has a player option, but he didn't. And again, not his fault. They won't get necessarily the opportunities that they may want to get because they're so overlapping in terms of what their roles may be. So there may be a chance that they get moved. But as a fan, looking at it from the outside in, maybe the Lakers can find a destination for those guys. And bring back a player that's a little bit more as useful. So and then we also have Austin Reeves, who was a standout player, compared to everybody, right? Like last season. So those sort of things matter. I think there is definitely a logjam going on. If the Lakers make a trade like this with the Jazz, it'll create a bigger logjam, but a good one. Because the other way to think about it is also this. The Lakers don't want to roster too many young guys that don't have playoff experience. Because that's the last thing we want, right? We did that 2 years ago. Like Kuzma, Caruso, Schroeder, they've had playoff experience, and obviously some of them made it to the finals with us in the bubble and stuff like that. But that was, in the first round against Phoenix when Braun was hobbled because of his ankle, he was trying to kick it out to his teammates, KCP and stuff like that. And they just, the lights were a little too bright for them. So grabbing a guy like Bojan, grabbing a guy like Patrick Beverley, grabbing guys like Evan Fournier, these are guys that maybe, and not necessarily NBA playoff tested, but they've also got lots of international experience. They've played in crazy environments internationally and stuff like that. And kind of used to the pressure and stuff like that of playing in these sort of things. This is just me trying to talk you guys into the Jazz option a little bit more. But I like that more. I think that is a good way of building depth. I think that is a good way of being successful, even beyond this move. And this is only if the Kyrie option is unavailable. And so that's the way I sort of see that too as well. Yeah, Ishmael, as you said, JTA is also a wing. I don't know how much he's going to play, but again, he's an able body. He'll rebound in space. He'll do what I'm sure Darvin Ham wants him to do. And we'll see kind of where it goes from there. So let me get so Ernest. How would you see the roster shape out if the Lakers get Kyrie? That is a good question, and that actually leads right into ABD, Adrian Broner's dad. He's never changed his name. I still remember you from the Lakers Central comments, but I don't know. That's a great question because if they add Kyrie, it's very clear we know what the pecking order is going to be scoring-wise, right? It's LeBron, AD, Kyrie. Nobody else is shooting the ball unless they get past the ball and they're wide open and it's going to be a three. But my concern is that you have to get somebody with size. You can't. So you're not going to be able to get away with Kyrie and then playing Lonnie Walker at the two, like a 6'1" and a 6'5" guy. That's just not going to happen. So the Lakers have to get a really, really good defensive player if you're going to be Kyrie's backcourt mate. If you're going to have Kyrie on this roster, so I'm actually kind of curious to see what that is. And we've heard Darvin Ham kind of specifically say out loud that the thing he wants out of Russ is he wants like a defensive pit bull and stuff like that. And not to say that Kyrie's not capable of doing something like that. I think he will. Probably not in the regular season, but when it matters, he will. But that's not why we're bringing him here, right? And Kyrie has a little bit of injury proneness to him, and so you don't want him being this guy who's like trying to check somebody full court and then not have energy, on his jump shots and stuff on the other way. So the Lakers really have to add somebody who's sort of a very committed 3-and-D player if they go for Kyrie. So that's the part I'm trying to figure out. As of right now, the Lakers have a lot of athletic bodies who maybe under Darvin Ham's scheme can be successful, because part of defense is being an athlete. Like, you have to be able to physically have the ability to stay in front of and compete with the guys that are in front of you defensively. But I don't think that's like the backcourt has the size to make that work if it's just Kyrie. So I think that's a genuine concern when it comes to that sort of thing, and I think it's something that they have to figure out when it comes to it. So that, Ernest, I think this is a really good question. But if they trade for Kyrie, I don't know. But all I can say is that they're going to have to find a 2 guard that can really defend, because I think it's very, very tough to do that. Like, they had Joe Harris, and the Nets had Joe Harris, and he's 6'6", but he was a willing defender. He was a capable defender to some degree. If anything else, he was at least he was average. So that worked out. The Lakers don't have that right now. Like, Lonnie's not that, Talen's not that. Maybe Kendrick Nunn is that, but I don't know what's going on with his leg, how injured he is, how injured he may not be. So that's just the kind of way. There's still a little bit more uncertainty, I think. But from a scoring and skill-wise size, you have Kyrie, you have LeBron, you have AD. Assuming AD kind of bounces back a little bit more into being league average as a jump shooter, like, he'll be fine. And that's the one thing I was going to tell you guys. Nobody said this, and I think I may have said it on another. If you go to Cleaning the Glass, and if you don't have a membership, that's okay. Cleaning the Glass has this calculation that it does, where it tells you that if your team shot league average from like these different spots on the court, this is what they could have been versus what they actually were, right? So the Lakers are one of the worst jump shooting teams in the league. But if you go to Clean the Glass and you see like what their expected field goal rate, effective field goal rate, it basically says that if the Lakers had shot league average from 3, and I think from like the long mid-range area, like, they were really good at the rim. Like, we took the most of it, like, obviously, right? Because we had Russ, everybody else was injured. He was just going to the rim every single time. Like, if the Lakers had shot league average as a jump shooting team last season, they would have had like the 3rd highest effective field goal rate across the league. So the bar isn't, you know what I mean? Like, the bar doesn't need to be Buddy Hield. It doesn't have to be you don't need 45%, 40% 3-point shooters on every single spot. We just need league average makes. We need guys that can make at least league average from 3. So the bar isn't as high as I think the perception of the team may be. But we weren't even good league average wise. Maybe outside of Malik, LeBron, Austin, kind of up and down a little bit as a shooter. So, I think that's the way I sort of look at it. Let me see. I get some more questions. Ishmael, what do you think the ceiling of the Lakers team is as presently constructed? This is a good question. I think it's a playoff team, but it is maxed out unless somebody on this team, even if we assume Russ plays better, I think there's just too much redundancy, because if we went into the season as is, we would have Russ, Talen, Nunn, Reeves, Lonnie. It's just too many players. Like, you would have to have like 2 of the guys that I listed become extremely good shooters. And it doesn't, teams are going to pack the paint. Lakers could put, and I said this last year, the Lakers can put 50% shooters, 3 players next to LeBron and Anthony Davis, and teams are still going to take away the rim. because it's LeBron and Anthony Davis. And when you have Russ, it just makes it that much easier for teams to do that. And so it really doesn't matter how you do it. Teams are still going to defend us the same way. And so I think with the roster that we have of the guys that are in that grouping, that's too difficult. And I don't think it's fair. I know he wants to do it because he wants to improve, as in Austin Reeves. But and I know Kendrick Nunn, wants to show everybody that he can be a very capable player and stuff like that. But I think it's too much it's too far of a leap that I have to make. Like Austin would have to turn into, I don't know, like I don't even know he'd have to turn into Joe Harris like this season, for us to have somebody jump out of that grouping next to Russ and stuff like that. So I think they're a playoff team, but I don't think they're a serious contender unless somebody has an extraordinarily, like multiple guys have extraordinary shooting seasons, or if Darvin Ham's system is just like overwhelming everybody. And it could be somebody like Anthony Davis returning back to being a really good shooter. Maybe not the bubble shooter, but closer to league average that could make the difference. But I don't think I would pen them in as a contender just yet. They just don't have the shooting around them in order to do that. Let me see if there's any. If you guys have any questions, you guys can always submit them, and I'll try to get to them. With the trade that I'm proposing, do I think that we're in championship contention? I think we're a lot closer to it. I think championship contention involves luck. It involves good health, and I think that's something that's plagued the Lakers. Anthony Davis hasn't been healthy. Some of it's not his, a lot of it's not his fault. LeBron hasn't been healthy. Like that's sort of the reality of the situation that I think people are ignoring. LeBron's been here for 4 years, and he's only been healthy for one of those years. Anthony Davis has been here for 3 years, and Anthony Davis has only been healthy for one of those years. And that matters. Like I said this last season, like there's no version of this team that can survive. There's no version of any team that can survive 2 of your star players missing half of the season. That's not reasonable to expect. And so, yeah, I'm not trying to kill championship dreams. It's just I just try to be a little realistic. I don't think the Lakers can be a championship team if LeBron is playing 40 games out of 82 games. The good thing to know is that LeBron and AD only played like 60 games the year that we won the championship, obviously because it was cut short because of the pandemic, and we won the championship. So the importance of rest throughout the season and stuff like that matters more, especially for a guy like LeBron. And I think the Lakers are trying to make sure that they make it work when it comes to that. Let me see what else we've got here. Would I be concerned about LeBron's load increase and having the ball more if we did the Indy or Utah? The Indy deal is concerning me because Buddy Hield is not a facilitator. Miles Turner is not a facilitator. Unless there's somebody on our roster, Nunn, Talon, assuming we don't make any other moves, Nunn, Talon, Lonnie, like they become dedicated ball handlers to like run the offense and stuff. And maybe that's what Darvin Ham has. That would be a concern of mine. Like every season, every time LeBron gets the ball, and this is probably more consistent for when we play really good teams, Bucks, Clippers, that sort of thing. Just think of the Clippers. How do the Clippers defend LeBron when he's the de facto point guard? Like they have him getting picked up by when Pat Beverly was there. Pat Beverly was picking him up full court, right? Like teams know that no matter what LeBron's age is, the only way that you can beat him is attrition. So you got to wear him down through the course of the game so he doesn't have any legs left in the fourth quarter. And so that's why the Lakers tried to target Dennis Schroeder. That's why when Schroeder didn't take the extension, they tried to target Kyle Lowry. And then once Lowry went somewhere else, the Lakers went and traded for Russ. I think LeBron is very aware of his wear and tear on his body, and playing point guard full time is not for him. And I think that's why you saw the scoring explosion last year. You have guys, again, Russ wasn't good last year, but it helps when somebody else is bringing the ball up the court and their eyes are on LeBron. to set him up for easy layups and dunks and stuff like that. And there was a lot of times in transition. Lakers probably didn't play enough transition basketball because they couldn't get stops on defense. But like LeBron looked great offensively. Like his legs look great at times, for stretches of games and stuff like that. It's when people started getting hurt and then we started asking him to play center where we really sapped his ability to be effective. And then he got hurt because we were asking him to do so much. And so that kind of stuff matters. I like the Utah deal more because of that, because I think adding a guy like Pat would help alleviate some of those responsibilities. If you watch him play, even with Minnesota, or you watch him play with the Clippers, Pat's not always the on-ball point guard, but bringing it up the court, stuff that we think as fans doesn't sap your energy, that actually does. Like Beverly would help with stuff like that. Even point of attack defense and stuff like that. We already know what he's good at. So I'm less worried about LeBron's health if we take the Utah deal, because I think we have more bodies to spare LeBron on both ends of the court. Oh, let's see. Where does Talon fall into all of this? I feel like he's the odd man out and will be traded. I think so too. I think the Lakers have been trying to move him. One of the residual issues with the Lakers giving these short-term deals to players is that once they get paid, the deals that they're taking are short-term. So Talon took the deal that he took is, I think, $10 million, and then he has a $10 million player option, which was the max that he could have gotten for any other team. I don't know why the Lakers gave him that, but that's a separate conversation. Well, I mean, I know why the Lakers did it, but it's a separate conversation, a separate gripe. But how much have you heard from Talon? For anybody that's watching or ends up watching this, like this past season, how much did you hear from Talon? He was the main player that we brought back. If you guys remember at the beginning of the season, when writers were justifying letting Alex Caruso walk away for nothing, it was so that the Lakers had the money, which was a lie. The Lakers had the money for both. It was a matter of tax. Had nothing to do with the Russ trade. Just, again, matter of tax. That the Lakers letting Caruso walk allowed them to sign Taylor. Since that point, obviously he got hurt. He missed like the first month or so because of the hand injury he had. How much did you hear? And the fact that you're still not hearing much about Talon sort of concerns me a little bit, because I don't know if his destiny is going to be to continue being on the Lakers. Again, why did we sign Lonnie Walker with our MLE? If Talon is part of our program and we know we're going to move Russ, why would we sign Lonnie Walker? Same thing with Kendrick Nunn. Like, what is their destiny if they're on there? And so it's this has nothing to do with the player. You know what I mean? Like, I think this is why I do it on YouTube now and I don't tweet about it anymore, because when I tweet something on Twitter, it's people, they twist the words or they interpret it in a way it's not even the intention of the tweet, and then I just get a bunch of negative stuff. I think Talon can be a solid player in the league. I don't know if he can do it on this Lakers team, because it is hard for young players trying to make a name for themselves, like Kyle Kuzma, to be able to do it and be able to make mistakes. Because when you're on a team and again, this is not LeBron's fault. I think this is more of a fan thing. Anytime a player makes a mistake, the default position is, well, we should have just given the ball to LeBron. Like, listen to what Zach Lowe said, right? Zach Lowe said LeBron should have the ball at all times. Why would you give it to anybody else? Like, if this is NBA 2K and there's no fatigue and there's no injuries, then for sure, give LeBron the ball every single possession. But that's just not how basketball works. And this idea that, like, we can do that is not going to work. And so the people that we do give the ball to, Russell Westbrook, Rajon Rondo, Anthony Davis, Dennis Schroeder, all these other guys that we give the ball to, they're always going to be compared to LeBron. What would have happened if we had given the ball to LeBron instead of these guys? And it is very hard for young players to succeed in that manner. And it's not just exclusive to LeBron. Same thing with Steph. Like, when they give the ball to Klay Thompson or Jordan Poole or Andrew Wiggins, and one of those guys, or Draymond Green, and they do something stupid, like I'm sure Warriors fans will turn around and say, well, you should just given the ball to Steph, right? Like, what is their main gripe? Why are you running split cuts? Why does Steve Kerr keep running split cuts for Steph? Just give him the ball and get out of his way, right? And they did that in the playoffs, in the finals and stuff like that when it was money time. But you don't do that in the regular season because you want to keep Steph healthy to make it to the finals, or to use him in those moments at the very end of it and stuff like that. And so those are things that coaches have to consider. But when it comes for these other guys, these players on the team, it's hard. It's hard to be successful in those sort of environments. And I think that was one of the things that just think about Kyle Kuzma. There was a point in our championship season at the trade deadline where many prominent Laker accounts were saying that Kuzma should have been traded for picks. Like, just get rid of him. Like, if you get a second round pick for Kuzma, amazing. And the Lakers didn't do that. And they ended up holding on to Kuzma, and they ended up winning a championship. He ends up actually becoming a better player. He became a better rebounder. He's actually doing a really good job on defense, stuff like that. Like, that kind of stuff. Like, when the Lakers downsized and they went with like LeBron at the 3 or the 4 and Kuzma at the 4 and Andy Davis at the 5, it all made sense. And we won a championship, right? And now Kuzma's with the Wizards, and he's getting double-doubles. He's getting like 25-10 a night. Bradley Beal goes down. Kuzma's numbers skyrocket because he's the only capable guy on that roster and stuff like that. So, like, that sort of stuff, like, we don't see it as fans, but that does affect players. And it's tough. Like, I would imagine, whether he says it or not, like, Talon was clearly affected by Russ being there. But it's not like Russ came there to take Talon's job. Like, Russ didn't trade himself to the Lakers. The Lakers traded for Russ. And the problem is that the people who made that decision, and then people dunk on LeBron and they dunk on AD, and they'll be like, oh, yeah, it's LeBron and AD's fault that they traded for Russ, and they're the reason for it. Players play basketball. If LeBron thinks that he can LeBron is the greatest player of all time, right? That's everybody wants it. It's either Jordan or LeBron. That's what everybody says. So if you're the greatest player of all time, you absolutely believe that any player that gets added to your team, you can make them work, because LeBron believes himself to be one of the most malleable superstars of all time, right? He can make anybody fit, anybody work. So he's never going to say, oh, no, I can't make Russ work. He's never going to say, I can't make Lowry or Dennis Schroeder or none of these, or Kyrie Irving. I can't make these guys work. But it's a front office's responsibility to look at it from a basketball perspective and make that decision. They made the trade for Russ and then had no plan of action after that. None. They just said, yeah, you know what? We're just going to trade for Russ. We'll let Caruso go, and then oh, wow, Avery Bradley got waived? All right, we'll add Avery Bradley. He played with us before. Dwight Howard, he played with us when we played the championship. We'll sign him too. Oh, AD wants another body because he doesn't want to start at center. All right, let's go grab DeAndre Jordan. He's a good locker room guy and stuff like that. Like, that's not a good way of managing the team, and that's why I've always said that, like, you have to look at the front office. That's where it starts, because coaches coach and players play. They don't have say. And I think LeBron was being honest. When he said that I'm not the one who, like, he's telling you, I'm not the one who pushes the button, right? Like, they may come and ask for his advice, but that's it. Like, he's not the one who pushes the buttons, and he's not the one who fills in the rest of the roster spots afterwards. So did he have a hand in it? For sure. But should they be lumped into this entire process too as well? Like, I don't know if that's necessarily fair and stuff like that. So I think Talon is in the same position that Kuzma is in. He's about to hit his player option, and he needs a place to build up like his value, because that's how these teams work, right? Like, if you don't have the stats, shout out to John Rivers. If you don't have the stats, you're not getting a contract. Simple as that, right? Like, think about Toscano Anderson. 2 years ago, he was a fan favorite, productive player, but the Warriors add more players with more talent on a timeline that's more consistent with what they want. he gets pushed to the back of the bench. He has no stats. He doesn't necessarily have the value that he had 2 years ago or a year ago when they first signed him. And now he's gone, right? Like he's taking a minimum contract to join the Lakers. So those sort of things matter. And I think Rich Paul is a very, very smart agent, and he's aware of those sort of things. And he's going to try to put him in this position. So I think, I don't know. It's really going to depend, Ernest, on just kind of what they decide to do, which trade they take, if it's Kyrie, not Kyrie. But he's in a pretty tough position. I think he's very consistently close to the same position that Kuzma was in. Because Kuzma, there was no way Kuzma was going to play over AD. He's never going to play over LeBron other than when one of them sat. And what complicates this even more is AD wasn't going to play the 5. So there was no way to squeeze Kuzma into that lineup, that starting lineup. And so that's why things ended up the way they did. Let's see what other stuff that we've got here. A dream non-Kai scenario. You're sending Russ to Indy with 2 firsts, THT, a second to San Antonio, and 1 to 2 seconds to New York in the Spida deal. So we send out Russ, 2 firsts and THT, and 3 seconds? Jenkins, you don't think that's a lot to give up? Who are we getting in return? Cam Reddish, Josh Richardson, Buddy Miles? I think the return is a nice return. I think we're giving up a lot. 2 seconds, 2 firsts, Russ, and THT. Yeah, I think that might be. Maybe you don't need the second rounders if you're doing that much. We should try to keep some of that if we can. But it's not a bad idea. So that would involve what? The Lakers. It would involve a Lakers-Indiana trade and then a separate, or maybe a 3-way, I guess is what you're saying here. Lakers, Indiana, and Spurs trade. I think I like the idea. I think it's just, we can always haggle over picks and stuff like that. But it might be a little expensive, but I would not be surprised if the reason why the Spurs are available as a third team destination is because Sean Marks has asked for some help. The Spurs are in a very similar situation as the Jazz. Like, they're clearly tanking. They have a couple of salaries, mid-tier salaries, that they may be okay with moving out and moving on from. And I wouldn't be surprised if Sean Marks asked them if they're willing to use their cap space if they get a first round in return from the Lakers to take Russ's contract. Again, Russ will get bought out. They're not going to keep him for a long-term period. But, some teams may go ahead and do that. If the Spurs take on Russ and they send out Josh Richardson to a team, Doug McDermott to a team. Who's the other guy that they have? Zach Collins. I don't know what they think about him. They have Jakob Poeltl. They have a couple other. I think they have one other guy that has a decent sized salary that they may move. But if they move out all the salaries that they don't want, maybe they do it. Maybe that's how they use their cap space for a first. And we'll see how that goes. But it's for sure. I don't think I think Russ is, if he gets moved, it's definitely going to be to a team that has cap space or a team that will absorb him so they can buy him out and waive him. So the Jazz, the Spurs, maybe Indiana. I don't know how serious they are, but yeah, man, it's it'll be very interesting to see what happens. But I'm not surprised that we're hearing about the Jazz and the Knicks. It makes a lot of sense using Russ's contract as an expiring, because the Knicks don't have one. Makes a ton of sense. And so that seems to be the case. So let me get through the last parts here. What is this? What is your take on AD at center at full time? Do you think that's something he doesn't want to do? I think it's both. I don't think he wants to play the 5. And I don't think his body can hold up to it. And this is coming from somebody who said that AD should play the 5 last season. I was very insistent on it, that he should play the 5. If he's going to shoot the way he did at the bubble, he should play the 5. But he clearly, again, not his fault. He is who he is. His body's not going to hold up. Like, it's just not. And I think Patrick Beverley went on national television and said that himself. Like, and then he's, he is who he is. Pat can be annoying sometimes, but I don't think he was lying. I think Pat does have some truth behind it, and the wear and tear on AD is just too much. And so, I mean, the Lakers went so far as to starting DeAndre Jordan. So that should tell you whether AD really, really wants to play the 5 or not. I think he tried to do it last season, especially when LeBron went down to help make Russ work. But again, the wear and tear is just crazy. Like, if you're going to play AD at the 5, you want him to be more defensive oriented, dunking the ball, finishing plays. You can't focus the offense through him and have him ISO every single possession the way Vogel was doing, and then also ask him to cover for bad perimeter defense and stuff like that. It's just too much to ask. Not realistic. So I think that's why we signed Damian Jones. That's why we signed Thomas Bryant. It's so that AD doesn't have to do that. At least maybe not until the last few minutes of the game. Let's see, Brandon, another question. Aside from the obvious Laker connections, what are your thoughts on the KD Kyrie situation overall? I think Kyrie wants his contract extension. I think Kyrie wants to stay in Brooklyn. But I think Joe Tsai and the Brooklyn Nets do not want to give him his extension. And I think exactly the way it's played out is what it is. I think KD is only in Brooklyn because of Kyrie. I do think both of those two, both Kyrie and KD, they love to play basketball. And they're going to, I don't think they're a threat to sit out a season. But Kyrie is also very aware of his value as a person. So everybody's been thinking like Lakers fans have been thinking, well, the worst nightmare is if Kyrie, if they run it back, the Lakers are screwed. Obviously, we know we have alternatives, so we're not screwed. But, the Nets have all this leverage. Well, the Nets have leverage until one of them gets hurt. So if Kyrie sprains his ankle, is he inclined to rush back to playing, knowing that he has a contract extension, that he's going to be entering free agency? Like, those kind of small things, again, like those are human things that matter when it comes to it. And I think I see both sides of the position. I see why the Nets were very, they placed a contingency on the contract. I see that, but from an asset management standpoint, and if you're a Laker fan, this is important because we do not have good asset management decision making. If you knew, and I think the Nets knew, if you knew Kyrie would reject anything more than a normal extension, and that you would move him, or you wouldn't keep him because he wasn't going to accept anything more than a normal extension, it would have made more sense to give him the extension and quietly shop him around the league. From an asset management standpoint, I think that would have been the smart thing to do. Obviously, it's not my money. Joe Tsai may be really pissed that he spent, he paid Kyrie for the games he would have been eligible to play last season, but they didn't let him play because of the whole COVID thing. They didn't want it to affect team chemistry and stuff like that. So I understand the front office, Marks and Joe Tsai may have thought that, hey, we extended an olive branch to you last season. Even though you didn't play in these games, we still paid you for it because we didn't want it to affect the locker room. And then when we needed you back because we lost so many bodies, we brought you back. So they may think to themselves, well, we tried to meet you halfway or whatever it is, and you're being unreasonable. Kyrie may be turning around and thinking, look, I'm a top 10 talent in the league. You guys are being unreasonable. So I can see both sides of the conversation. But my thing is, if you knew that was going to happen, just give him the extension and shop him. Like, he clearly wants to make sure that he's paid, he's taken care of. From an asset management standpoint, you should have done that. But now you have the situation where he goes out and publicly is seeing if somebody will trade for him before he opts in. And then when he opts in and things don't go their way, now you have KD come out and formally request a trade. So now the optics of it is really difficult. But But you could have avoided that if you had just given the extension and then just quietly trade him. If you knew that KD was going to leave because you were going to trade Kyrie after giving an extension, then shop them both quietly. Doesn't matter. But I think the way they went about doing it probably wasn't the best way, but I don't have all the facts. You know, I don't know how it ends. You know, like, because if I say that KD's going to get traded and Kyrie's going to get traded, people are going to be like, oh, you're a Lakers homer and you want Kyrie on your team. So that's why you're saying that. I don't know how it ends. But I don't know if the situation's repairable. Because in order for it to be repairable, the Nets are going to have to give Kyrie the contract terms that he wants. And you didn't want to do it before, so do you want to look like a team that just caved, right? And I think that kind of stuff matters. So I'll be curious to see how it works out. I could see a version of them both being traded. The deadline to me is training camp, right? Like I don't think the Nets are. I think that's the deadline that they're probably working with. I think that's the deadline the Lakers are working with, and any team that wants to trade for KD too at the same time. And so it's going to be a 2-month thing. You know, we're going to have to wait until we get an actual conclusion to this. But I don't know. It's very hard to tell how something like this ends. I just think the way that it was managed was the worst possible way you could do this. Like, imagine if the Lakers went into this contract, like went to the contract extension with LeBron, and the first thing Rob does when he sits down, he says, LeBron, we're not trading for anybody. We're not making any moves until you decide, until you agree to this contract. We're not going to do anything. Like, LeBron would probably be like, all right, man, fuck this. I'm out of here, right? But chances are Rob just went to Rich Paul and LeBron and said, whatever contract you want, 1+1, full 2 years, just a 1-year extension, we'll make it work, whatever you want to happen. And your interests and our interests are aligned. We want to win a championship, and we know that you want to win a championship. So we're just working on that. But there are things that are out of our hands. Like, we can't force the Nets to trade us Kyrie if that's who you want. We just have to wait and make ourselves available and make an honest attempt to do it. So that's probably why things were productive. So, you know, we'll have to wait and see. But it's good to hear that the Lakers have alternatives when it comes to this whole situation. Now I'm going to take one more question, and then I'm going to call it a day, because this is much more exhausting than I realized. Ernest, if the Lakers keep Russ, do you move him at the deadline or just keep him for cap relief by season's end? So the first question, I don't think Russ is going to be on this team by training camp. I don't think at all. I don't think LeBron wants him on this team. I don't think Russ wants to be here. But I think Russ is a professional, and I think LeBron is a professional. And if it so happened that he was on this team, I think they would find a way to make it work. I think Darvin Ham is an excellent coach. I think his philosophy is excellent. I think he is a much better leader of men, as many people have said, used as a term, and he would get things to work. But I don't think both players can coexist. LeBron can coexist with Russ, but Russ skill-wise can't coexist with LeBron because he doesn't space for LeBron. If Darvin Ham finds a way to utilize Russ in a better manner, maybe that would be untrue. But then we still have the variable of Anthony Davis. If Anthony Davis comes back and he's still a horrendous shooter, that causes a lot of problems for the Lakers. And the Lakers, as of right now, don't have a lot of shooting on the roster. So I honestly do not think that Russ is going to make it into training camp. And if there are Russ fans watching this, it has nothing to do with Russ. And I think it has everything to do with the Lakers front office. And I think fans on Twitter have turned it into a Russ versus, like, the Russ fans versus the Bron fans, and then the Clutch fans versus the Russ fans. I think that's a Twitter thing. But I think the reality, the villain of this story should be the Lakers front office. And so I don't think the Lakers front office is going to have Russ make it to training camp. And they're just waiting to see if the Kyrie alternative is there. And if Kyrie doesn't work out, then I think they'll find a way to move him. Very, like, 1% chance in my mind that they take Russ going into training camp and stuff like that. Again, just look at the redundancy. Russ, Talon, Nunn, Lonnie, Reeves. 5 guys all do the same thing. That doesn't work. And many of them don't have matching, like they don't complement each other, right? And so that ends up sort of being a problem. And so it just looking at it like objectively and looking at the roster, I don't think it happens. Or just keep him for cap relief at season's end. So that second question gets answered by LeBron's extension. If LeBron extends for even 1 year, your cap space is gone for next year. So is $20 million of cap relief next season? Is it who's the big guy that's out there? That $20 million lands you. It's not a max tier salary, right? So maybe there's a couple guys out there that you could get a $10 million player, a $10 million player, but you're not really adding competitive players with $20 million in cap space in regards to that. Now, if LeBron doesn't extend and he just says, this is my last season, then maybe I could see a situation where they just hold on to Russ, because then that would give them like $77 million in cap space going into next season. But I suspect LeBron's probably going to extend to a 1+1. I think most of the smart cap folks have sort of mentioned that too as well. That's probably what they'll do. But I don't see it. And this is coming from a guy, I've always been a big fan of Russ. I'm from LA. I always root for LA guys as long as they don't play for the Clippers. I think it's just too tough to make it work. And I think our front office did a very, very good job convincing everybody that it's one person's fault, that none of this worked. And so, it is what it is. That's just how this game works. That's how media works. And that's how front office politics work. And we are in the situation that we are. So, we'll see what happens. But overall, I just want to thank everybody for joining the stream. I was expecting to go for like 30 minutes at the very most, but you guys had a lot of questions, really great questions. So I appreciate everybody joining. I think this will get added to the YouTube account. So you guys can always rewatch it there, or if anybody missed it. I'm going to try to do this. I may do post games and stuff like that when the regular season starts, or I may just do a random live stream every now and then when I get bored. I really just wanted to be able to test out the StreamYard and see how it works. But I've got a lot of cool ideas for when the regular season starts and stuff like that. So I appreciate everybody joining. And if you guys haven't, if you can subscribe to the YouTube, it's Radio KBE. I do a lot of YouTube and content stuff. That's where I'm migrating. If you're here from Twitter, that's where I'm posting everything. Like, I've learned that Twitter is just a place where people are miserable. And even if you say, hey, Lonnie Walker can be a really good player, you'll get 50 comments of people saying, oh, well, what's the difference between him and Talon and blah, 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 and stuff like that. So I just posted there because people are really invested in this team and being successful. You can find me there. So if you guys can like, subscribe, share, whenever you see stuff, I appreciate it a lot. And if nothing else, I'll see you guys in the next video. So thanks for joining and helping me test out this episode and test out this platform. I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend.